Thank you very much for your waiting. Now we'd like to start the SDGs International Forum for Achieving Carbon Neutrality and Realizing a Decarbonized Society, organized by Hyogo Prefecture, Asia Pacific Network for the Global Change Research, and Institute for the Global Environmental Strategies. I am the Master of Ceremony for today, Toshiki from the Hyogo Prefecture, Environmental Department, General Affairs Division. First of all, on behalf of the organizer, I'd like to invite Motohiko SAITO, the governor of Hyogo Prefecture, to address to you.
Thank you for the kind introduction. I am SAITO Motohiko, governor of Hyogo Prefecture. On behalf of the organizer, Hyogo Prefecture, the Asia Pacific Network for Global Change Research, and the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies, I am pleased to welcome you both from home and abroad to the opening of the SDGs International Forum for Achieving Carbon Neutrality and realizing the Decarbonized Society. ここから日本語ですいません。
Thank you very much. And in Hyogo Prefecture, local people have long taken initiatives that have enriched our regions, including sustainable agriculture, local industries, and the Build Back Better efforts from the Great Hanshin earthquake. Such attitudes resonate profoundly with the concept of the SDGs, and they can serve as a great reference to achieving the SDGs. Seeing the Expo 2025 Osaka Kansai as a great opportunity to showcase widely various programs led by the local people of Hyogo, we have launched the Hyogo Field Pavilion project across the prefecture for visitors to see, learn, and experience Hyogo's local initiatives. And it is important to invite the people who are visiting this expo to Hyogo Prefecture. So we'd like to utilize that as an opportunity to let people experience the Hyogo. So we have the Hyogo Field Pavilion as a concept to challenge. This is what we have in our mind. And to this end, we have established the headquarters to promote the concept of the SDGs as part of our policies, as well as the Hyogo SDGs have operated through the private-public partnerships this October. So we have strong hopes to strike a balance between solving social challenges and reinvigorating regions, so to eventually elevate the blending power of Hyogo. So through the achieving SDGs, we'd like to achieve all these other targets too. So we'd like to utilize these as an empowering of the Hyogo's blood. And one major field of the SDGs initiative is the environment. So we have also declared that Hyogo will achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, ahead of the national government. So in order to achieve this goal, we have revised our global warming countermeasures promotion plan last March by raising the 2030 greenhouse gas reduction target to 48% below the 2030 level, which is even more ambitious than the national target. And at the port of Kobe, we are seeing the world-leading projects unfolding, such as a pilot project for transporting liquefied hydrogen and power generation using hydrogen. So in the Harima coastal area in Himeji, we are now drawing up the plan to upgrade ports to carbon-neutral ports in view of building a hub for hydrogen supply chain network. The other day, together with Kawasaki Heavy Industry, and we have the MOU, so in the Himeji area, we are going to have the hub for the supply chain of the hydrogen. So we mainly in the Hyogo Prefecture, we would like to lead this movement from the SAITO area to the Kansai region in further promoting the carbon neutrality. And the aim of this forum is to promote widely the principles of the SDGs to the people of Hyogo and businesses in Hyogo, and to gain insights from local initiatives that have the power to even solve global issues. So we'd like to find the ideas about the regional activities from now. And when we think about SDGs, we may think that something new has to be done, but that's not the case. So Japanese society or Japanese people have been establishing or succeeding the cultures and traditions or customs in each region, and many of them have incorporated the ideas of SDGs. And to make the fresh acknowledgement about it is important. The other day, from a high school student in Kobe, I had a word that when you talk about the SDGs, nothing new is acquired. So there is another gogo. There is a culture to place importance on the quality water for the production of Japanese sake. And such tradition can be found in various parts of this region. So what we have been doing as a kind of custom or practice has a kind of aspect which can contribute to SDGs. So what is important is to discover these things and visualize it and disseminate it to the world. And I totally agree with this high school student. So SDGs is not at all very complicated, difficult things. What we have been doing in our daily lives, it can be a way to contribute to SDGs. So in 2025, we have the Osaka World Expo Osaka, and that is 30 years after the Great Hanshin earthquake. So including the Ukrainian situation, the geopolitical situation is very tough. But in order to make the better world for all of us, this is a kind of common goal for the whole world. And this was started by Hyogo Prefecture. So we have something to offer to the world. And we'd like to utilize it for the reconstruction of the country of Ukraine from now. So Hyogo Prefecture has many kinds of initiatives for the SDGs, and I want to know the people of Hyogo know about it and disseminate it to the world. That's what I want to do together with you. And finally, I'd like to conclude my opening remarks by extending my gratitude to all those who have made the forum possible, and my sincere wishes for the health and success of everyone attending here today. Thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you very much, Mr. Governor. And today's forum is held in a hybrid manner. So we have the event physically here in Kobe City and also online. And in the first part, we have the keynote lecture and talk session. And in the second part, we will have the panel discussion. And please wait for a moment to start the first part of the session. So now we'd like to start the keynote lecture. And the organizer for today's forum, from IGES, we invite Mr. Kazuhiko Takeuchi, the president, for the keynote lecture. And today he will talk about realizing a decarbonized society that leads the world from the region, creation of the regional circulating and ecological sphere through local production for local consumption of energy. So, Mr. Takeuchi, the microphone is yours. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for introduction. I am the president of the Institute of Global Environment Strategies, Takeuchi. And today, this is the title of my keynote lecture. First of all, I have to say that we are at a very important, decisive area, or decisive decade. So this is a decade which will decide the way for us from now. So by 2030, the environment, whether or not we can go in a sustainable way, or whether we go into the very destructive way toward 2030. In the coming 10 years, it will be decided. So by 2030, achieving SDGs by 2030 seems very, very tough and difficult. And when we see the whole situation in the world, by 2050, the emission of the greenhouse gas should be zero. Without that, it is said that it is impossible to stop the global warming. And to reduce the emission of greenhouse gas to zero is a very ambitious target. And to achieve this target, the large-scale reduction in emission is required by 2030. And Mr. Governor mentioned the 48% of the reduction of the emission by 2030, which is a rather ambitious goal than the national government's target. But to achieve such target in a short period of time is very difficult. And recently, I've been to Montreal, Canada, and the purpose of the visit is to participate in the biodiversity treatment. And this biodiversity treatment was based on the 2010 IGES target. To exceed that target, by 2030 target was newly set. And originally, this meeting was to be held in China, but because of the zero COVID-19 policy by Chinese government, the venue was moved to Canada. And so the Kunming Montreal target, which is finally set as a target for 2030, says that by 2050, 20% of the biodiversity have to be restored. And for this purpose, by 2030, the great target is to stop the loss of the biodiversity. And in order to achieve that, 30% of the land and 30% of the marine ocean have to be protective. And that is what was decided. And this is what we call 30 by 30 in English. And in any case, this is a very ambitious target. And we have to do various things in a very short period of time. Then we have to see the situation in a very comprehensive, integrated manner. So far, when we discussed the climate change, it is only the climate change specialist who discussed it. And in the same way, the biodiversity was discussed by the biodiversity specialist alone. But this way of doing things will not bring us to anywhere. So now we are trying to establish a concept or theory to integrate all of these and link them to SDGs. This is an idea which is being generated right now. So for this purpose, we have to think about various things, and not only the agreement by the world, but and also the commitment by each country is not enough. So the local, original activities or grassroots type activities and involvement of the various stakeholders, not only the government or private sectors and citizens, all of them have to work together as one to promote these initiatives.
Recently, we are paying more attention to the youth generation because they are joining the COP conferences and they can decide the fate of our future. Under such understanding, they are joining these conferences actively. The Climate Change Convention, Sharm el-Sheikh, it was the place where the COP meeting was held in Egypt, and as well as in Montreal, youth group were seen to be active. And I saw them, and I was quite delighted to see their active performances. We talked about some of the ambitious targets. Looking at the Earth's average temperature, compared to the industrial revolution. Can we contain the rise of temperature to 1.5 Celsius degrees or 2.0 Celsius degrees or beyond 2? If we go beyond 2, it will affect our global environment and our daily lives. And depending on the rise of temperature, the impact will be different. Paris Agreement was signed, and now we are executing that. When the agreement was made, we said 2 Celsius degrees. That's the target, we said. But we had to change that to 1.5. When we look at the island nations, including Fiji and other nations, said that 2 Celsius degrees target will not mean the protection of the environment. So in the Paris Agreement, 2 Celsius degrees was originally and possibly 1.5 Celsius degrees. That's what the Paris Agreement indicated. But IPCC made a report about 1.5 Celsius degrees rise and its target. IPCC's outcome is a summarization of all the different fields in the world to understand the climate change globally and what's going to happen in the future. That was a communication made by IPCC internationally. So it's a huge organization. It's not done by one person, but many people's activities. For example, coastal reef, or what about the impact to agriculture or the people's health? When we think about all of these, we need to gather experts from different areas to conclude on one thing. Let's look at this graph. In order to create this graph, tens of thousands of pieces of scientific evidences have been aggregated. We read all of these, and that's what we came out, which is the graph here. And you see 2 lines here. The red line is the 2.0 Celsius degrees rise, and the blue one is 1.5. What do they mean? For example, coral reef impact will be discussed, or impact to human health can be discussed here, as well as the damage to economy is also the same. The difference between 2 and 1.5 is clear. There is a huge difference in terms of the damage and impact. For example, coral reef will be impacted more by the 2.0, and we have more areas where coral reefs will be died out. As you can see in this document here, so 0.5 Celsius degrees difference means that there will be more impact to hundreds of millions of people. Such differences are now clarified, and internationally we can have a more accurate discussion. That is why we're looking at 1.5 Celsius degrees target, which is a hefty goal, which we need to achieve globally. That is actually the agreement now. And how do we execute on that? That's what we're discussing now. In each country, climate change convention, framework convention is placed, and each country makes different commitment about the emission reduction. They report on that. However, once they report on that, and if we aggregate everything from every country, it's not going to help us achieve 1.5, let alone 2.0 Celsius degrees target. So this means that we need to make more efforts to reduce CO2 emissions or GHG emissions. And experts say that we need to be more ambitious. Regarding the biodiversity, we have already discussed that it's quite ambitious. 30% of sea and ground areas biodiversity to be recovered. Even in Japan, such hefty goal has not been achieved yet. Looking at the national parks, they are expanded to have more natural areas, but that is not going to help us achieve the target. Regarding sea areas, they need more protections, which have not been designated. Sea protection areas were discussed and set forth about 5 years ago. But with this protection area only, we cannot reach 30%. We can only achieve a little more than 10%. We need to expand more. But where do we expand, and how do we protect that? That's a really important challenge for us. So, internationally speaking, we need to change our way of thinking, which is that just like Satoyama in Japan, we need to not only protect the nature, but also live in harmony with nature, between people and nature, I mean. And people's activities will result in protecting the environment. That's what Satoyama mountainous landscape does for us. If it can be included into the 30% target, then on the ground areas, at least, we will be able to achieve this 30% biodiversity recovery in many areas in Japan. In order for us to think about that target, let me introduce one English term here. It's called OECM. Looking at a known nature protection area, we also look at other nature protection areas. So OECM is an acronym in English. I was discussing with all the stakeholders about how to translate that into Japanese. We're saying that this is a coexistence or harmony with nature area. I think that's something that more people will be able to understand, this OECM. So through such terms, we want to promote biodiversity to be enhanced, as well as contributing to achieving the SDGs. That's the discussion we have just started. So regarding this point, in Japan, biodiversity has a national strategy. At Montreal, there was a decision made, and this national plan is going to be revised sometime soon. In my understanding, it will be around the beginning of April next year that Japanese government will make a cabinet office decision. So internationally and domestically, there are adjustments of policies and plans, which is ongoing. So by the way, I think you know SDGs very well, but when I was in New York to discuss SDGs, I was not sure that SDGs will be penetrated in Japanese society. I did not expect that. But unexpectedly, but that's a fortunate thing that people now know about SDGs more than before. Especially local municipalities and private companies and general citizens, including young people, are the ones that are working cross-sectionally and are interested in achieving the SDGs. I believe this is a great outcome. These 17 goals are not only about the environment, but also economy and society. We also talk about people's inequality as well as gender issues. So it's quite comprehensive. We may not be able to achieve all of these. If you are working in a company, then you will focus on achieving one of the 17 SDGs goals. But this may be problematic from the spirit of SDGs. Of course, working on one particular goal is important, but my point is that between these goals, there is interaction between each other. After understanding that, you can focus on one of the particular goals. That's an important thing for us to know. So right now, there are 17 goals and 169 targets in SDGs. By looking at local municipalities' policies or companies' code of conduct, they are based on the SDGs more or less. But the interactions between the goals are not clear. So that's why I went to Stockholm, and there is a center called Resilience Center within Stockholm University. It's a research center within that university. So there, they summarized SDGs and how to think about SDGs in this figure here. It's not just a linear organization. The basis of the SDGs is the nature. There are SDGs related to nature. On that are the social-related SDGs. Even upon that are the economy-related SDGs. When we combine them effectively, we can strive for the achievement of SDGs. So, bearing that in mind, let's look at April 2018. I was the chairperson of the 5th Basic Environment Plan and its meeting. And during this meeting, we discussed a lot, but we need to have more integrated approach. We need to also backcast the SDGs. So what is backcasting? It's not about thinking about the goal from now. If we do this way, we may not be able to achieve hefty goals if we think only from the current status. First, we need to set the goal of the future and backcast what we need to do, what additionally we need to do to achieve that. So that is the approach of backcasting. It's opposed to forecasting. It's not forecasting the future. It's about backcasting from the future to the present. That's the approach we're taking. And that's how the discussion was held. So ultimately, decarbonized society, material cycle society, and society in harmony with nature will have to be integratedly considered to create a new vision of society. So this integrated view of society is expressed by the regional circulating and ecological sphere, or regional CES. When we say circulation, it's about decarbonization or carbon circulation, as well as resource circulation. So we have two meanings here in circulation. And of course, ecological sphere, this is about the coexistence of people and nature. This is also a vision for the future society. So here, it's not about a particular size of regional CES. We need to think about East Asia in terms of the regional CES. The same goes with Japan. And we also look at regional CES from a local point of view. So it's more hierarchical. It's got different hierarchies. What does it mean? Let me talk about that now. Let's think about rare metal. I think that's a very important resource for us now. Exploiting mineral resources are unsustainable. So within the products that you have, there are rare metals that we have to recycle or reuse. That's a very important way of thinking. And we talk about them as urban mines from which we get the resources. But if we do so, we need to look for the rare metals from massive amount of waste. if we need to think about resource circulation from broad areas, for example, East Asia or nationwide here in Japan. But when we look at this, or industrial waste or household waste in Japan, they need to be circularly processed within the particular community or areas. So those resources, depending on its property, will be scaled up and down. So that's why it's hierarchical or scalable, regional circulating ecological sphere.
So there are various stakeholders, and which is very important. And let me add here, the international collaboration is important. So now we are in a society which is open to the world. So our wisdom can be used in other parts of the world, and the wisdoms from the other parts of the world can be used in our society. So to create a community in which we have such kind of collaboration is important. So we have to have a kind of perspectives of activities in the local level and also open to the world. And these two perspectives are important. And 1.5 degrees Celsius is a very important target at this moment. And at IGES, we have proposed the 1.5 degrees Celsius lifestyle. And this is a product of the collaborative research with the Overseas Research Institute. And to achieve this 1.5 degrees Celsius target, well, in order to make contribution, what change we have to have in our lifestyle? For example, to change from the ownership of the passenger car to the use of the public transportation, or to have the less energy consumed in production of food. So to change the type of food we consume so that we will have less energy consumption in production of it. And that will also contribute to the health of the people. Then we can find the win-win relationship. So these things can be found in various aspects of the lifestyle. And we will come up with ideas and wisdoms about this point. And especially after the COVID-19, we come to think that it's better to have a decentralized society rather than a very centralized society. There is a kind of saying that the independent or creation of the local autonomy is important, and I think this has deeply connected to this idea. So sometimes it is said difficult that to have such economy established within a local region would be difficult, but by having the appropriate solar power generation or wind power generation, or by utilizing Satoyama, local mountain, we can have the local production and local consumption of energy. And to switch to that direction would be good. And on the other hand, we are not living in a closed society. So as for the information or the exchange of people, we will continue to have it with the other parts of the world or other parts of Japan. So this is a kind of social structure we should have. So based on the harmony with nature, we'll have the circulation of resource and create the decarbonized society on top of that. And that will make a contribution to the establishment of the sustainable society and also achieving the goals of the IPCC. And the entities who will support this structure. In the past, for the local region, it was only the local entities, but for the world, it was only the international organizations. But now, the local entities can support the international organizations. So the ideas from the local level can change the trend in the world. So the mutual relationship between the global to the local levels are not separated. So they are now incorporated or intertwined each other. So we have the so-called multi-level governance. And of course, the relationships between the urban areas and the rural areas is important. So far, the urban areas and the rural areas did not have the good relationships. For example, in terms of, for example, the production of food, even though the production of food taking place in the rural areas, people tend to buy the cheaper food from the out of the country, and the agriculture industry in rural areas got weaker. But we can change it to the win-win relationship. So the blessing of the nature from the rural areas can be offered to the people in urban areas. So in terms of the finance or in terms of human resources, the urban areas can support the rural areas, agricultural areas. So in this way, by promoting the establishment of the good relationship between the urban and rural areas, it will be very important in creating the regional CES. And this is one of the actual cases in Toyama City. So to establish a compact city, the so-called light rail transport, LRT, was introduced. So the city of Toyama is actively introducing this. The former mayor of the Toyama city took this initiative to introduce light rail transport. And what is very interesting is that by introducing this LRT, the elderly people moved to the area near to the line of this LRT, and the aged people who do not drive anymore by themselves use this LRT and move. So this railway contributed to the solution of the aging society in Toyama City. So by changing by improving the environment, we can expect the contribution to the society and economy. And another case is from Saito City, and this is a city which made the life of the world Japanese-clustered ibises. And the city of Sado is now working on the decarbonization of the society. And Governor Saito, when he was young, was very active in this Sado city. So I would like to talk about it later in the talk session. And it is difficult for the large-scale urban cities to have the local production and consumption of energy. So in that case, the urban cities can have the collaboration with or partnership with the rural areas in Tohoku region, so that they can establish the win-win relationship. And I think that is important for expanding this local CES. And this is a case of the Hyogo Prefecture in Hokusetsu region. And so for the environment and for transportation and also the exchange between the urban and rural areas, various things are being done. And one point is that the utilization of the Satoyama, the local mountain, as a resource, and to view it as a culture of the people, and to make Satoyama, the local mountainous areas, as a kind of key for the revitalization of the local economy. So IGES is supporting Hyogo Prefecture in establishing this local CES in Kitasetsu region, utilizing the Satoyama, and I'd like to talk about it later in detail. And we also have the Asian network, CES Asia Consortium, which was concluded or established. And so I'd like you to get interested in such international initiative. And there comes a time to conclude my keynote lecture, and I do not repeat all the things stated here, but the regional CES will be the basis for us to achieve the decarbonized society. And rather than thinking only about the decarbonized society, thinking about the economy and the livelihood of the people in the region, we can make the contribution to them too. And the Hyogo Prefecture is an appropriate place to be a kind of model prefecture of such concept of the general CES established. Thank you very much for your attention. President Takeuchi, thank you very much for your keynote lecture. Now, we would like to start the talk session between Mr. Takeuchi and Mr. Governor. So please wait for a moment. Thank you very much for your waiting. Now we'd like to start the talk session between Mr. Takeuchi, the president of IGES, and Mr. Saito, the governor of Hyogo Prefecture. I am the master of ceremony for this talk session. I am Hamada from the Hyogo Prefecture Government Environment Management Department. And today, the talk session is held with the theme of the SDGs initiatives for the environment in Hyogo Prefecture. And a moment ago, we had the keynote lecture by Mr. Takeuchi about the ideas of SDGs. And in this talk session, first we'll have the introduction of the SDGs initiatives by Hyogo Prefecture from Governor Saito. So, Governor Saito, microphone is yours. So I'm very much impressed by the keynote lecture by Mr. Takeuchi. Especially, I'm very impressed with many things, but especially when we work on initiatives on SDGs, one on the climate change is one of the most important things. That's how I feel about it. But we have to think about the other aspects too, including the biodiversity and also the SDGs. So this concept is important, and I clearly understood that point. And also the multifaceted collaboration is very important. So there are 17 SDGs, and rather than seeing them at one place, but to think it in a multi-level, starting from the one related to nature, to the society, and to the economy, I think that perspective is something I will have to place importance on. And thank you very much for your keynote lecture, which is full of insights. And Hyogo Prefecture, since it was August last year, I became the governor of Hyogo Prefecture. And Hyogo Prefecture has been working on SDGs. And what we're trying to do is to visualize the initiatives which can contribute to SDGs. So we now placed the SDGs as one of the important pillars of the government ovulation. And as I mentioned in my opening remark, we have been taking various initiatives, and we have established a platform together with the businesses. And especially in Hyogo Prefecture, we have the very strong manufacturing industry as local industries. For example, one for the chemical shoes. And in Hyogo region, we have the bag manufacturers. And their kind of awareness about SDGs among these manufacturers is not so strong at this moment. So how to raise awareness is things we have to think about. And without such awareness, it would be difficult to appeal in the market or to attract human resources from now on. So I have a sense of crisis in promoting these awareness raising. And that's what we are doing as Hyogo Prefecture right now. So as Hyogo Prefecture is promoting or working on the SDGs, and I think that is a great thing. And one thing I want to introduce to you is that SDGs requires the checking or evaluation of the result of the activities or initiatives. So while these are the voluntary initiatives, not based on the request by the international organization, but each country comes up with its own target. And there must be the process to evaluate the result of the process or initiative. And that is a kind of voluntary review of by the country. And IGES has been working with the local governments to provide such evaluation methods not only for the country, but also for the local governments. So starting with the Tokyo metropolitan government, we have such evaluation of the local initiatives in many local governments. So I made a study beforehand, and Hyogo Prefecture hasn't started that evaluation, voluntary evaluation yet. So I would like you to have this evaluation as a Hyogo Prefecture to see whether that your initiatives is achieving the target or not. So I'd like to talk. I wanted to talk about this today.
Thank you very much. The viewpoint of reviewing the progress is very important. SDGs Future City by Cabinet Office has not certified us yet, so we need to prepare this year so that we will be certified next year. We are now in the preparation phase. Important thing is that even though we are certified as Future City, that is not the end. We need to evolve that. In order to do that, review is very important. PDC cycle needs to be run. That's a very important point. So we want to learn more, and we'd like to have your guidance from IGES. And also, regarding SDGs initiatives, I think young people's actions are very important, as you mentioned. That's one of the important points. Z generation, who are born from 1995 to 2010, they're young. They're about the university age. When we talk with them, we can understand how much Hyogo Prefecture and companies within our prefectures are working on SDGs or not. They're already learning about SDGs at schools. They want to work for SDGs-oriented companies. They have a high awareness about SDGs. On the other hand, companies and prefectural office in Hyogo prefectures will not be accepted if we are not working on SDGs. So there is a sense of urgency for us. We need to work together with the young generation to achieve the SDGs. At the same time, we need to retain young generations in Hyogo Prefecture. Do you have any comments regarding that point? Yes. As I mentioned before, young people do join the COP meeting, and they do a lot of activities. In the Sharm el Sheikh in Egypt, that was one of the COP meetings I attended, and for the first time, Children and Youth Corner was established, where young people gathered and discussed. And in Montreal as well, young people's participation stood out. But conventionally speaking, participation to COP was basically done from government officials and ministers. That was the mainstream in the past. We had some side events. It was like an attachment to the COP meeting. But we have now seen a reverse of the number of people joining, and we see more and more young people joining COP meetings. So when we decide a policy in a country, how do we incorporate the views of young people? And how do we make sure that when a local municipality decides a policy to drive SDGs, as one example, then the question is, how do we make sure that the young people can officially get involved? Rather than just hearing from young people, that's not the end. This does not mean that we are doing the right thing. We need to improve the way we engage with the young people. So, Mr. Saito, if you can also think about that viewpoint, that would be great. And you are young, right? I'm 45 now. I think I'm relatively young in terms of the governor of prefectures, and I think that viewpoint is very important to work with younger generations. When we work for SDGs, we basically talk with partnering with economic organizations. That's very important. But young generations' collaboration with us is very important. Hyogo Prefecture has a student future council that's held with me and students discussing whether with each other and SDGs initiatives should also be included as one of the themes. We want to work with those young generations and expand that circle of activity going forward. Thank you very much. So now we want to talk about today's theme, creating the local SDGs or regional CES with energy, local consumption, and production. So Mr. Saito will talk about some of the initiatives of Hyogo Prefecture. Yes, as Mr. Takeuchi mentioned, regional CES is very important to be established. It's not only about energy, but also food problems. As mentioned already, Hyogo Prefecture is vast in areas. North includes Tajima area, which is a snowy area, and southern part is Awaji Island. It's quite warm. So we have a diversity of areas in our prefecture, and we have a lot of agricultural and fishery products within the prefecture. And even not only that, we produce many other things. And we need to connect those areas to the cities. So in that sense, regional CES needs to be at the center of those initiatives. And local consumption and production is also a very important concept, in my opinion. So far, farmers used to produce things and they were consumed locally. But going forward, when we think about the transport distance of food, we should minimize that so we can reduce the CO2 emission. As you said, working on one thing does not only help farmers, but also help us reduce the CO2 emission. So it has a ripple effect to other positive impacts. So that's why we want to work on that. And Hokusetsu Satoyama CES was already mentioned. So cities and Satoyamas are really located near from each other in Hyogo Prefecture, including Kobe City. On the backside of here, we have Mount Rocco. And in Kitaku areas, we have a lot of farm areas. In Takarazuka and Kawanishi and Inagawa areas, they're in between Osaka and Kobe, and they have a lot of rice terrace and farm areas. So the question is, how do we connect all of them effectively? We went to Nishitani, West Valley of Takarazuka City. They are quite aged, and local residents are also concerned about running their community going forward. So we wanted to do something about it. I have a strong passion for that. The local residents have a strong passion for their community, and that's why energy issue or Satoyama's utilization for this urban people as well needs to be also thought through, and we need to take actions on that. Thank you so much. So lastly but not least, from Mr. Takeuchi, do you have any comments about the initiatives by Hyogo Prefecture? Yes, thank you so much. I mean, recently at the United Nations headquarters, Food System Summit was held. Japan also joined the conference. So it's not like food summit, it's a food system summit. Why do we talk about systems? Because producing food is not only about the environment of the producers. We also need to think about whether we're damaging the environment of producing food. Do we transport too far away from one place to another? Do we produce more than we need? So those are the questions included in the food system. We need to look at it as a system. Otherwise, we cannot understand the overall structure. That's my thinking. And in that context, how can we evaluate the initiatives of Hyogo Prefecture? You may want to revisit what you have done already. By doing so, actually, looking at our current society, in some cases, agriculture and related industries may not be sufficiently working economically. So we need to change the overall picture. And this Food System Summit can be a cornerstone for us to change the way of thinking. Regarding Hokusetsu Satoyama CES area, I want to just emphasize the following point. As an energy resource, we not only use biomass, but also such infrastructure and culture needs to be protected. I mean, we protect the landscape, we protect the people's culture in there. I actually visited the site, and wood chip, it's a wonderful thing. I think it's made from well, one of the oaks, and it's a really expensive one. It's used for teas, for example. I'm talking about sawtooth oak used for charcoal. It's not used for general purposes, but through such purposes, we can create industries that are more value added going forward. It's not only about the prices for a particular vegetable, but we want to understand what is the cultural value of that vegetable, what is the landscape value of that vegetable. When we think to that extent, we need to look at the agriculture crops and and forestry products as well. So that is a viewpoint we would like you to have, Mr. Saito. Thank you so much. I really agree with what you're saying. Biomass power generation is one thing, but we need to really make the best use of the regional resource and its infrastructure for us to have a higher value added. And that also should attract more people into Hyogo Prefecture. That viewpoint is very important. So I want to make sure that we do not forget about that. And as you mentioned, we wanted to talk about storks. When I was in the 20s, I was working for the Ministry of General Affairs, and I was working in Sado City Hall, and that was when Mr. Takano was working in that city so that the storks can go back to wild. And I wanted to talk about the certification system, and the storks may be extinct, so we wanted to make them get back to wild. So we have to have more farms or biodiversity infrastructure, including soil and other organisms. And we need farms, and we need to have less herbicides. We need to have more biotopes so that a lot of living organisms can live together so that the storks can come back. That's what I thought. And that can also be incorporated as a branding for the rice raised there. I asked Mr. Takano as mayor of that city, and I said, that's a great one. And he said that we learned from Toyo Okas, the Japanese crested ibis. That's what he had mirrored and imitated from Hyogo Prefecture. So Mr. Nakagai was the mayor at that time in Toyoka City. So those two cities had the same concept. So biodiversity-based agriculture started in Hyogo Prefecture. We need to actually know that. And regarding this Japanese crested ibises, they have been living in Awaji's island as well. So they have a lot of agricultural crops that can be led to a biodiversity oriented. And Hyogo Prefecture's agricultural crops could have a higher value and could be consumed locally more and more. So my point is actually this. Within Hyogo Prefecture, we have a lot of things that the world, not only Japan, but also the world, can pay more attention to. And we may have the solutions that may connect to the solution or achievement of the SDGs. We may have hints within our prefecture. So we want to look forward to the 2025 Expo, where we are going to hold the Hyogo Field Pavilions that will show the hints for achieving the SDGs. So there are a lot of hints in our prefecture. So local initiatives could be the solution for global issues and solution for those issues. That's what we want to do for the Expo. Thank you. Another thing that I like about your prefecture is that you work for international cooperation, right? Looking at Hyogo Prefecture's companies and Indian companies, they interact and exchange with each other, and they share wisdom and knowledge with each other. That's a wonderful example. As for me, I go to India every year, and there is an institute called TERI that works on the resources and energy. When I meet them, they always talk about Hyogo Prefecture. So that's another way that Hyogo Prefecture can be global. Your wisdom can help the world. That's what we would like you to do from Hyogo Prefecture. Regarding Sato City, I still talk with Mr. Watanabe, the current mayor of Sato City. Yes, so I think I helped Sato City be recognized as a world agricultural heritage. So that's one of the examples where Sato City helped build a value added, and they're great. And renewable energy is another initiative. When we think about the thermal power generation, they will be destroyed when there is a tsunami. So Sato City's power will be out. And due to the heavy snow this time, we had seen some power outages. Such vulnerability should also be mitigated through renewable energies. And this is now successful with the coexistence or living in harmony with nature. So I'm also telling him that we need to also work on that from energy point of view. That's very important. So the stork and Japanese crested ibis are connected, right? Hyogo, Toyoka, and Sato cities are all connected, in my opinion. The mayor, Mr. Watanabe, also came to Hyogo, and together with Hyogo, Sato from Niigata Prefecture can work together even more. That's what I'm thinking. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We have so many things to talk about. And lastly, I'd like to have Mr. Governor about the coming initiatives on SDGs as Hyogo Prefecture. So I want to have 2 more hours to talk with Mr. Takeuchi, but time is limited. And thank you very much for this opportunity. And the Hyogo Prefecture's SDG initiatives have just started. And they are, as I mentioned in my first message, have been found in the various activities in societies. So we have to visualize them and brush them up. So from now, Hyogo Prefecture, APN, and IGES, led by Mr. Takeuchi, will collaborate. And having the support from all of you, we would like to further promote these SDGs initiatives, starting from the local perspective to the world. So I ask for your kind and continuous support. Thank you very much. So thank you very much. So now time has come to conclude this talk session. Thank you very much, Mr. Governor and Mr. Takeuchi, for your very fruitful discussion. Thank you very much. So, Mr. Takeuchi and Mr. Saito, thank you very much. Now, we would like to have a 10-minute break. And we will start with the second part of the symposium at 2:50. Thank you for waiting. We'd like to start the panel discussion. First of all, I'd like to introduce you the panelists on the stage. So, first of all, Mr. Norikazu UEMATSU, Director of SymEnergy, and Mr. Herath Srikantha, Director, Enviforecasting, former visiting professor at the University of Tokyo, and Mr. Teruyuki Kishimoto, President and CEO, NTT Anode Energy Corporation, and Mr. Hiromi OKUYAMA, Branch Manager and Chief Manager for Small and Medium-Sized Environment Unit, Kobe Branch, Japan Finance Corporation, and Mr. Noriaki SUGA, the Chief Executive Officer, Environmental Management Department, Hyogo Prefectural Government. And the coordinator is Mr. Satoshi Kojima, Program Director of Kansai Research Center of IGES. So this is Kojima from the IGES Kansai Center speaking. So first of all, I'd like to introduce you to today's panel discussions program. So the theme of the panel discussion is the creation of the regional CES. So we have the panelists who have been active in the realization of the decarbonized society in various fields. So first of all, we'd like to have the introduction of the initiatives by each panelist in his or her own field in about 5 to 6 minutes. And after that, about the initiatives introduced, we'd like to have the exchange of opinions and also what kind of issues they now have. And today, we are not going to reach any kind of conclusion, but by exchanging ideas and opinions about the advanced activities in each field, we would like to find the clues for realization of the regional CES and also the decarbonized society from now. So I appreciate your very frank opinions. And on the very last of the program, we'd like to entertain the questions from the floors and also from the attendees online to the panelists on the stage. That's how we're going to proceed this panel discussion. So first of all, we'd like to have the introduction of the initiative by the panelists, starting with Mr. UEMATSU from SymEnergy. And this is UEMATSU from SymEnergy speaking. Thank you very much for this opportunity. So first of all, let me introduce you SymEnergy as a company. I think not many of you know this company, so let me introduce you what we are. We were established in 1993. So next year we'll celebrate 30-year anniversary, and we are the energy company which create the coexisting society. So I think our mission is same as that of the theme of this event today. And we are headquartered in Kobe City, Hyogo Prefecture. So we are the local company, and we have been taking various initiatives. And these are the features of our businesses. And there are 3 major segments for our business. First one is the renewable energy engineering. And this means that basically the production of the development of the renewable power energy plant and operation of them. So we have the engineering technology to operate the renewable energy power plant. Not only the solar power generation, but we also have the biomass, biogas, hydraulic, wind power, ground thermal. So we have the multifaceted renewable energy power generation and about 40 billion yen of sales. And especially the power compared to the major power companies whose scale of business is trillions of yen. Our scale of business is very small, but not other players have such multifaceted renewable energies. So I think we are a rare existence in Japan. And after producing such renewable energy is sometimes have to be put into good use so that it can be fully utilized. So smart use of the power is important. So we have the provision of the service to the customers through the smart use. And we have the locally designed usage of the renewable energy so that we can make a contribution to the circulation of energy in the local area. And the next page, you can find the community we want to establish. So the renewable energy. By each region, there are the areas which is suitable for the wind power generation or the one with hydraulic power generations. So in a way that local production, local consumption can be possible, we combine the possible or appropriate renewable power generation and make the circulation of energy in the local area. And 67% of Japan is mountain or forest. So when you talk to the local areas, how to turn the biomass into energy is always a kind of topic. So the biomass center and forestry are now combined into the one business segment. And what we are actually doing, let me introduce you 2 cases. And both of these started in 2020 and decarbonized area selected by the Ministry of Environment, and I applied for that and was selected as the project for the decarbonization leading areas. And one is in city of Awaji and of Hyogo Prefecture. And the so-called Awajikara, which can be interpreted as a power of Awaji. So we are involved in the local energy company. And this is the so-called PV, or the establishment of the solar power generation system. And seeing the situation of each area, we set up the power generation system. And now the Awadi city has the problem of the unintended bamboo forest. So when such unintended or uncontrolled bamboo forest result in the issues of the landslide or the wild animals, so the appropriate control of the forest is required. But after the bamboos are cut down, there's no way of use. So we turn them into the chip for the fuel for the boiler, and that heat is used at the provided to the hospitals and other facilities nearby. And after burning the chips, to make them as a waste is not what we do. So we turn these charge to the agricultural use. So there is a circulation of the char and also the energy. And another case I want to introduce to you. Next page, please. Is a case about Ogata village in Akita Prefecture. In the same way, this was also selected as a project for the decarbonized leading society region. And the theme is quite different from that of the Awaji city I mentioned a moment ago. And this is a village with just 3,000 population. It's a very small village, and 65% of the village area is rice field. That means the large amount of char is produced per year. But they were just burned now. But now it is not turned into energy. And the village itself is very small, so even if the renewable energy is produced, the network to provide them to each household did not exist. So we are trying to establish the grid so that the power can be provided to each household, and also the char are burned, and the energy is heat is converted into energy. And so not only the electricity, but also the heat is now circulated. So in the previous theme, biomass is a kind of key word. So being different from the solar power, in the case of the biomass, we have to think about how to process it to the very end so that it can make a contribution to the economy. So the circulation of biomass is now being implemented. That's what we're doing in Akita Prefecture. This is all about SymEnergy's project. Thank you very much. So not only the solar power, but also the biomass. In order to revitalize the local regions, you have been working in various initiatives. It's very interesting. Thank you very much for the introduction of your initiatives. Next, I'd like to invite Mr. Herath from the Enviforecasting.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It has been a very educational discussion in the morning. My talk is slightly different. I'm going to focus on the challenges we face in translating what we know to sustainable practices, especially in the problems we face in the development projects implementation in the developing country. Shall I have the first slide, please? First, let me explain why climate change forces us to look for integrated solutions. Now, this figure shows the numerical models we use to predict the extreme rainfalls in the near future. Top left is the rainfall we experienced in 2017. The others are all simulations. Out of 12 simulations, only one can reproduce the actual situation. This means we have to very carefully select the climate weather system and parameterize these models to get reliable results. But the changes to climate systems make these models not to perform well in the future, so we need continuous research. On the other hand, in the long term, we know that the climate change will increase our mean and extreme rainfalls. But these models, climate models, are very coarse, 20 to 10 kilometer size. And also when you look into the past data, they don't match very well with our observations. But on the other hand, we are trying to implement flood control projects to achieve targets we have identified from our previous experiences. Now, climate change will increase these limits, and we have to commit new resources to fill this gap. But with uncertainty, we can't design precise engineering works, so that it's very difficult to commit resources. That means climate change forces us to share resources with other societal needs, not only in disaster management. Next, please. Next slide, please. So how do we actually implement these programs? To do that, we need to implement the projects as transdisciplinary projects, which means the experts don't work independently, but they have to work with the user community in identifying the best projects which address all the needs. Secondly, we also need very good mechanisms to translate the knowledge into the local situation and supported by continuous research. To address these issues, we set up a university network at the United Nations University in 2009 called UNCESA. The idea was to look into how we can implement sustainable projects. One of the important outcomes of this group was to propose that we need to have field projects comprising of local academia, local government, private sector, working with the communities to design the appropriate projects. We did some projects on the sustainability of rice systems in the Philippines and China, and also developing sustainable agriculture systems, combining the modern irrigation systems with the traditional irrigation systems. But the experience was, while the technical parts can be implemented, it's very difficult to get support for education and management components. Next slide, please. In 2016, I had the opportunity to take up a project as a team leader to develop a flood control system for the Colombo flood management system supported by the World Bank. We had real-time monitoring, flood forecasting system, inundation and impact assessment, as well as loss and damage estimation. I implemented this project according to the transdisciplinary principles. The local universities, the private sector, government agencies worked with me in designing this whole system. This was completely constructed by young local engineers who were trained on the system. Now, after 3 years, it's functioning very well, so that part has worked well. But again, the problem was the environmental components I wanted to implement, especially rainwater harvesting, infiltration, management of wetland, and also to link these center with the educational sector, schools, and the postgraduate sector. They were designed, implemented, but they did not continue, because I was told that when we have these projects agreed on, there's no allocation for finances for these things. But ultimately, these are the most important things for the sustainability of the projects. And I hope in the future, all these development projects will have some allocation where the outcomes can be used for achieving SDGs, utilizing the outcome of these projects. So next, please. So what we have now problems. On one hand, we have very low-cost monitoring devices, computational systems, and the advances in machine learning and AI systems to design effective early warning systems for all affected communities. However, senior management is often not very familiar with these technologies, and we have very great difficulty in implementing them. Also, when you think of different institutions who are competing for resources, there's very little incentive for them to work together. When you think of international finance institutions, the aid projects are implemented on ground by program officers, and they are hugely pressurized to rapidly disburse loans, and there's very little room to change the projects or get the feedbacks from the local community or the changing environmental conditions. So who should be the champions to do these projects? What I believe is the best support for sustainable projects have to come from the private sector, especially the new young startup companies who are using new technologies, who can provide services directly to communities and users. Now, in the last 5 years, there had been many new companies that had come supporting the management of water resources, agriculture, and disaster risk. And what we need is to bring together the academic input to these platforms. So Enviforecasting is a platform we are developing to bring together academia, especially the universities, postgraduate sector, and the private sector to work with communities. Next slide, please. So this system is deployed in the Google Cloud, which has, it can reproduce early warning systems for any place. We have monitoring devices, we can deploy monitoring devices, hydrological and hydrodynamic risk analysis, weather forecast, and also tools for machine learning and linked to climate change forecasts. This is being supported by the university network, which I mentioned before, as well as the private sector. We have now some large private companies who would like to work together. And we hope by this approach, these efforts, we can contribute to translate whatever we know to sustainable practices, and especially create knowledge societies in local communities who can absorb the advances in the global knowledge. Thank you very much for kind attention.
Thank you very much. So local SDGs or local CES was discussed, and there are a lot of disaster risks, and we need to be robust in a decentralized manner as well. So that's a very important challenge to be met, and that's what you have spoken to. Thank you so much. And one other point is that we need to involve young people, as you have said, and as Mr. Takeuchi also mentioned. That's a very important point. You have also worked upon that area as well. So thank you so much, Mr. Srikantha. So let's go to the next NTT Anode Energy. Mr. Kishimoto, could you go ahead?
This is Kishimoto from NTT Anode Energy Corporation. So I'd like to talk about the decarbonization and the digitalization. Up until June, for 23 years, I've been working for the NTT West, and Hyogo Prefecture is a place I worked to provide the telecommunication service, especially in the time of the disaster. And I'm very happy to be invited to this event today. And this is the outline of the NTT Group and NTT Anode Energy. As you know, NTT Group is a provider of the communication service, such as optical service and system integration and various other services. And NTT Anode Energy is to support the establishment and maintenance of the power system. And we have about 10,000 locations throughout the nation, provide the operation and maintenance of the system. So we have been talking about the power blackout due to the heavy snowfall, and some of our members are now working in the Niigata Prefecture to provide the emergency power supply to the buildings. And in the field of the smart energy field, NTT Anode Energy Group is very active. Not only with the NTT Group, but also the entities out of the group, we're trying to provide such service. And as you know, this graph shows you the acute development of the telecommunication system, and also the cloud data center introduction, so the growth of the data communication. And as you know that these things have achieved a very acute development and growth. And green innovation toward 2040 is a keyword we now have. So as NTT, by using about 1% of the NTT consumes about 1% of the total power. So it's a great consumer. So it declared itself to get innovated in green energy. So, of course, we have to work on energy conservation, but the next generation of telecommunication system, such as ion, should be introduced. And by using these, we'd like to come up with a drastic energy saving. And we can also use the biomass, solar power, wind power, geothermal powers. So we'll have these facilities for the renewable power energy production. And by using such renewable energies toward carbon neutrality, we'll do our best. And in 2030, mainly with DOCOMO, the mobile data centers, and by 2040, as a group, as a whole, carbon neutrality is to be achieved. That's what we are doing at this moment as a target. And of course, these results have to be achieved as a group, but also together with the other companies and local governments. We would like to provide our results of the effort. and operate them together with them. And let me introduce you what is ION Initiative. This is a very innovative infrastructure of networking and data processing. And global 100 companies, including the communication companies, are involved in this initiative. This is what we're doing now. And one point of this ION initiative is the 100% times of the electric efficiency, and also the big transmission capacity, which is 125 times bigger than the current one, and end-to-end latency of the 1/200th. And the other day there was the event connecting Tokyo and Osaka, and the event was held with a low latency, so can be held in simultaneously. So first of all, on occasion of the Osaka Kansai Expo, we'd like to show what we can do with this initiative. And so not only the networking, but metaverse, digital computing. So in our NTT pavilions, I'd like to show such technologies we will have. And by 2024 and onward, we'd like to develop them and apply them in actual smart cities. And after 2030, we'd like to expand them throughout the nation. So from this aspect of the new technology development, we'd like to make contribution to the decarbonization. That is one of the target of this ION initiative. And from SymEnergy, from the perspective of the development of the community, the local production and local consumption of energy was discussed. And we are also selected to the 100 decarbonized projects. And for the various decentralized power source, how to link the visualization through the technology is one point we have in mind, so that we can avoid the wasteful use of the energy and can achieve the better efficiency in the consumption of energy. So that is important in realizing the local production and local consumption of energy. That's what we're doing. So for the whole community or for the carbon neutrality by the companies, not only with these, but also for the employees who work for these companies or who live for the people who live in such areas, we want them to feel that the decarbonization effort is what they have to do in their daily lives. So for 25,000 people, we are now providing a service with which they can feel that what contribution is being made to the carbon neutrality, and they can enjoy it as a kind of game. So not only each individual, but as a kind of company's division which promotes such initiatives, you can use this service. So various services and results of the ITC are now utilized to contribute to the carbon neutrality or decarbonization. That's what we want to do. Thank you very much, Mr. Kishimoto, for the decarbonization and also for the creation of the regional CES, connecting the urban areas and rural areas. You are providing various services using the digital and ICTs. So I think that is the kind of key. And what you're doing based on such concept. I'm very much interested in what you introduced. Thank you very much.
So from Japan Finance Corporation, Mr. OKUYAMA. Yes. Let me first talk about JFC as an overview, as well as the decarbonization and its drive at our Kobe branch. So as you can see here, this is the overview of JFC. We're 100% funded by the government as a financial institution to complement the private financial institutions. We work with them and we help them fund money. We have 152 branches in Japan. All the prefectures have branches excluding Okinawa. And it's been 14 years since we were established. We have the National Life Financial Corporation, Agricultural Forestry and Fisheries Finance Corporation, Japan Finance Corporation for small and medium-sized enterprises, and Japan Bank for international cooperation have been incorporated into JFC. So each have different roles that they serve. Within Hyogo Prefecture, Kobe and Kobe East and Akashi, Himeji, Amagasaki, Toyoka branches. There are 6 branches. And for Kobe City, we have JR Kobe City, Harborland. Nearby, we have a branch there. Page 2. This is the business and management plan of JFC. In the left-hand side, we have the second one for supply funds for priority given to strategic fields of growth, etc. And we have energy and environment countermeasures to be taken, and we support them. On the right-hand side, you see the organizational plans. So we have initiatives for the reduction of greenhouse gases. Next page, please. Within the prefecture, the JFC's decarbonization initiatives are shown here in a scheme. There are 3 pillars here. So from number 1, I will talk about it. The first of all, in April, Kobe Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and we worked on carbon neutral to have a survey about the companies in Kobe, Hyogo Prefecture. Our business partners were surveyed by us, and first of all, do you understand decarbonization? We asked, and 72% said yes, and 30% said no. We are working on it in a specific matter. They answered for 45%. So there is a gap from the people who didn't. And if you're working on such initiatives, how much are you working on? And they answered, they are setting the temperature for air conditioners, for example. Those are the basic steps that they're taking. Next question is about whether they know there is public support for decarbonization or not. And 35% said yes. And 8% said they have utilized public support. So the necessity and public support for decarbonization have to be penetrated through better communication. So through the Chamber of Commerce and JFC, we have held seminars as well as venture pitch activities. So we hold seminars for Hyogo Prefecture's environmental policy section. They also gave presentations. Next page, please. And we work with Hyogo Prefectures. We have a special funding system that started in April. Hyogo Prefectural Office certifies companies, and they can get the regional revitalization fund up to 720 million yen, and including 20 years for equipment fund. And we can use a special interest rate under certain conditions. Within the borrowing term or collateral as well as financial standing, the conditions apply, but without collateral, about 2% of interest rate for 20%. With collateral, that's 1.2% for 20 years fixed. The users, we include the people from number 1 through 5. In this page, in the bottom, you see the things we're working with local financial institutions, including Minato Bank, to support decarbonization initiatives. So upon necessity, within this scheme, we can say that energy saving centers, energy optimization diagnosis is recommended by the financial institutions, including Minato Bank. And as I said, within the Hyogo Prefecture system, in number 4, the energy center does optimization diagnosis for business operators. So the Hyogo Prefecture system can be used in tandem with this system here. So both up and down systems can be used. Next page, please. We talked about funding only, but even though funding is given, we need to make sure that the businesses are run well. Otherwise, it does not make financial sense. So we need to have more promotion for sales channels, or we need to give them more PR opportunities. Kobe City is creating Anchor Kobe to help innovation spread. And on the 13th of September, a venture pitch event was held. They focused on the carbon neutral as a pitch, and there are companies 6 companies that made their presentation pitch to talk about their initiatives to a wider audience. That was the event held, and we want to continue this kind of event. So we are working with financial institutions to drive carbon neutral, not only through funding, but also through educational and PR activities, business matching, information sharing as well. So that's what we do. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Okuyama. So carbon neutral or local SDGs will have to be achieved, and the society needs to be changed as a whole, and financial sector, as well as its mechanisms and investment rules, will have to be considered as well. And I think that's what you are exactly working on. So that's really interesting. Thank you so much.
So now I'd like to invite Mr. Suga from the Hyogo Prefecture. Thank you for the introduction. I am Suga from Hyogo Prefecture government. So I'd like to talk about the initiatives by the Hyogo Prefecture in creation of the local CES, or local SDGs. So as was introduced in the keynote speech, as for the regional CES, we have the 3 themes of the decarbonization or coexistence with nature and circulation of resource. But unfortunately, on local level, when we try to establish the solar panels, sometimes we cut down trees in the mountain. This is what is actually happening. So the decarbonization and harmony with nature are in a trade-off relationship. This kind of situation can be seen. So we have to have all of the themes of decarbonization, coexistence with nature, and circulation of resources have to be in a relationship which can create a synergy. That's what we want to achieve. And today, decarbonization is a theme of the forum. So let me take this up as my topic. And in this slide, you can find the initiatives by the Hyogo Prefecture, and together with the entities in local areas, such as Hyogo Prefecture provides various support to the local entities in, for example, introducing the renewable energy. So first, we have the workshops or provide the advisors so that people will get interested in the use of the renewable energy. And when these local entities decided to introduce the renewable energies, we sometimes offer the opportunities to study with the consultant or lecturers. Or in case of the use of the river water as a source of energy, we provide the subsidies so that the proper investigation can be done by the specialist. And on occasion of the introduction of renewable energy, initial investment is required. So we have the non-interest-bearing loan available to the players. So together with the local organization, we provide the support in actual introduction of the renewable energy project. And in the talk session between the Mr. Governor and Mr. President Takeuchi, in Hokusetsu region in Hyogo Prefecture, or in Takarazuka and Kawanishi and Inagawa cities, we have the regional CES in Hokusetsu region, and we have been promoting this together with IGES. And as was mentioned by Mr. Takeuchi, in the city of Kawanishi, there is a place called Kurokawa. And we have the special charcoal produced in this area. And the trees were cut down to be the material for such charcoal. And this mountain can be said as a kind of best case of the Satoyama, or local mountain. And also in the Ishitani region, in Takarazuka city, did not have such tradition. And now, after some developments, now the prefecture owns the mountain in the Ishitani region. So sometimes the maintenance of the mountain is not enough. So together with Tokushima Regional Energy, this mountain or forest owned by the forest is now cut down to be converted into chip and biomass boilers fuel. So we are groping that way to have the 21st century style of the Satoyama or local mountain. And we have the subsidy from NEDO for this project. And we have the exhibitions and panel about this project, so please take a look at it later. Thank you very much. So thank you very much, Mr. Suga. So various activities by the supported by the government are introduced. Thank you very much for your introduction. So
you have already talked about your company's initiatives. So from me, we'd like to ask you some of the challenges that you're facing. So we're running a little short of time, so maybe 2 minutes per person. If you can be brief, that would be great. Sorry, we're running out of time, but Mr. Uematsu? So looking at establishing a local energy company, what kind of benefits do you think there is for your local areas? And looking at Awaji City and Akita Prefecture, you have established a local energy company, but what kind of issues or challenges did you face and overcome? Yes, thank you. First of all, regarding local energy companies are established based on the two benefits. One, conventionally, you create a large power plant and you purchase power from external companies, but now it's done locally, and then economy can now be circular this way, so it can produce and consume energy locally. And by the running of the company, the know-hows about energy production and consumption can be accumulated. And it's not easy to do all this consumption and production locally, so we need to get the buy-in from the locals. So by having a local company, it's really important to have the independence or autonomy by those companies. And what are the challenges? Well, regarding our businesses, especially biomass, it's difficult. Even though you produce, you have to pour more resources and think about what to use those resources for. The long-term perspective is very important. And local communities' commitment is essential to make it all happen. Who is going to drive it and who is going to work with them? So this kind of consensus building is very difficult. And that's one of the challenges. Okay, thank you so much. I think sustainability here is also difficult because you need to work with a lot of stakeholders to get consensus, right? So thank you so much. So next, Mr. Herath, I'd like to ask you in English.
So to make a framework to localize global knowledge, so what kind of challenges, issues you faced, and then also I say you gather experts on the researchers to provide various service to local community directly through platform. So for constructing such platform, what kind of perspective is very important?
Thank you very much for the two very important questions. The first one is when you want to implement something new in a local community, the problem is the mismatch of the technology or the competence of the local society. So you have to invest on bringing that competence to the level required. And if I give an example, I first early warning system I reviewed those in 1990. Then I reviewed another one in 2010, one in Philippines, one in Sri Lanka. They both failed after about 2 years. The same reasons. The communication system was not proper for the local conditions. The maintenance was not addressed. So nothing much has changed in 30 years. And in this system, I spent 2 years getting the local people, communities, and the companies to work together. And then it was successful. However, this is a very rare case because normal development support aid does not allow this. I spent 3 months negotiating with the World Bank to let me hire new young graduates and do this. So we are talking about integration. We are talking about the need to adjust according to the conditions. But our financing has no provision for that. That's the biggest problem. The second one, you ask the perspectives, and I think it depends on what we want to do. If it is infrastructure, like if you think we want to build a hospital, that's easy, because the people working is a local system. So you have the infrastructure, it's easy. But if it is related to the environment or the communities, it should not be taken and implanted there. We have to have a good understanding of the practices, culture of the community system, and we have to we have to really commit enough resources to bring it to the situation where it's sustainable. So that's what I think the current way of disaster development assistance is not working well. And this is why I think the real hope is in the private sector, because with the ICT communication, we can now directly communicate with the users' needs, and it's very transparent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So there is a gap between financial institutions operation, so then the real needs at the local level for this kind of issue, and also for environmental issue or sustainability issue, integration is really important. So there is no straightforward solution. So it's
it has to be iterative.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Next, we'd like to ask Mr. Kishimoto now. So utilizing ICT, you manage energy management system, and do you have any areas in mind for your practice? Or as Mr. Suga explained from Hyogo Prefecture, Hokusetsu Satoyama Regional CES was explained, and NTT Anode Energy may be able to work in this area. What do you think? Yes, thank you so much. Regarding energy management system, we're looking at 5 areas out of 100 energy management areas. Starting from this, we would like to be selected for the 3rd and 4th selections. In the first selection, we have already thought about creating a platform to supply energy for everyone. As a domino effect, maybe we can have a ripple effect so that our systems can be used nationwide. And the next generational smart meter can be measured every minute. So power and telecommunications will be fused in the future. Looking at local energy companies, we want to work with them. And next is biomass. Biomass power source needs to be stable, and it's essential. It needs to be highly efficient, and it needs to provide power even at nighttime. Telecommunications, a data center should also benefit some applications of this technology. Depending on the scales, Satoyama may be a small scale of application, but FIT power source could be utilized here. We can trade the power source with FIT system. So that's the solution for local production and consumption. So in this local areas, we can stably supply energy. And how do we use the heat source that we procured? For example, is it used for the vinyl houses or hot water facilities? If we can, that would be great for sustainability. And efficiency gains are much better in smaller scale businesses. And operation can be unmanned in some areas. So those are the characteristics that we see for some of the biomass facilities with different scales. So we hope to work with these areas. Regarding ICT, at NTT West Japan, we have a platform on forest. We have drones used to create the 3D images. We also used sky photos so that we can make minimize the need for going to the on-site. We can look at the number of trees as well as absorption of CO2. What is the asset value of those areas? We can utilize our technology through platforms we're demonstrating right now. In Manya, in OKUYAMA Prefecture next to us, they're also going to follow up their demonstration. So, looking at this forestry industry, we need to start from the beginning, and they cut the trees, and they're used, and they're buried underground. So throughout those phases, ICTs should also be used more smartly. That's all. Thank you. Thank you so much. Renewable energies on a local basis needs to be considered here, and solar power generation is not enough, right? So in order to create a stable energy supply, biomass is very important with the ICT to really promote the use of bioenergy. Thank you so much. That was relieving. Mr. Okuyama, I have one question. So you talked about Hyogo Prefecture, and you talked about the finance system. What was the reaction from business operators and other financial institutions? Another question is this. Other than the finance system, is there any support you are giving for carbon neutrality? Yes. We work with Hyogo Prefecture, and the first project, sorry, I hope, yes, actually it's here. It's in the newspaper. 2 days ago, we met the CEO here in the article, and 80 people joined in this international forum, and 300 people globally listening. And we just promised that we will call your company's name repeatedly, I said. And Shimamoto Diecast is a company that's created aluminum diecast for automobiles. They melt aluminum, put into a mold, chill it, and solidify it. So it consumes a lot of energy. Originally, their business wanted to reduce their energy consumption. They have worked on it for many years, but they used the finance system as a support from Hyogo Prefecture and Energy Saving Center, and their energy optimization diagnosis was taken by this company. It's actually written in Kobe newspaper here. In late June, this diagnosis was taken by this company. And for this diagnosis, we had 2 judges. They inspected their factories of the company, spending half a day. And after that, they came up with proposals about what to do for this system to function. And in this article, it's really easy to understand, although there are a lot of letters, but the melted aluminum is put to mold and things are produced. It's really hot, and they have a thermometer. It says 200 to 300 Celsius degrees. If we can utilize the exhaust heat, that would be great. They can also integrate the equipment to save energy. They thought about it, but they didn't know what to do. That's what CEO Shimamoto said. Business partners started to ask him about decarbonization, so that's why they took this diagnosis in order to get the support from JFC. So I discussed with the CEO 2 days ago, and in the next page, we talk about the impression. So regarding this diagnosis, it's you have to pay 16,000 yen only. It's really low cost. And 1 month later, we had the reporting session, and the current energy usage and management status, as well as feasibility for reduction, were reported. The reduction, return on investment, and investment amount were all indicated. So this is indicated on the left-hand side, and it's 5 years to collect the investment in 3 businesses. 1 million yen is needed, but sometimes more than 5 years are required to get the investment. And so 13 million yen will be required in total, but this is really a lot of detailed information by just paying 16,000 yen. So, for example, you just close a cover for aluminum melting processes. It can also help save energy, but they didn't know that it can also help save energy. From operational point of view, a CEO was looking at things, but it was also reviewed by experts, which is great. And that was the impression of the CEO in the company. Not only just give finance, we also give consultations for them to improve their business and their profitability. That's our non-finance services. Thank you so much. That's it. Thank you so much. This is a concrete example of that diagnosis. So that was really informative. Thank you so much. So, Mr. Suga, I have a question. In order to introduce renewable energies, I think penetrating that into local areas is a key. But in order to do that, what is a challenge? What is your difficulty you faced? Yes, thank you. From SymEnergy, Mr. Uematsu talked about this, but when we work with local people, consensus building is very important. How do we get a buy-in from locals? It's not an easy job to do. For example, if it's a large-scale solar power generation, for example, in Tokyo, there is a company that installs it, and they get profit that goes to Tokyo. But in this case, it's not emotionally easy. It's not emotionally easy to accept for locals. So we need to revitalize the local economy. So it needs to be done in a win-win situation when we introduce renewable energies. So how do we do that to revitalize the economy, local economy, through renewable energy introduction? So that's what we're also exploring. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So to benefit the local region is what you want to achieve, but sometimes there's a kind of very intertwined interest of the people or stakeholders in the local region. So sometimes it's difficult to make the situation well prepared. So including the revision of the laws and the regulations, we have to provide an environment that consensus can be built more easily among the local entities. Thank you very much. So we are running out of time now, but I want to entertain the questions from the floor or also the participants online. And if your question is to the specific panelist, please identify it. So does anybody have a question? So those who are in the venue, please raise your hand. And I am now checking the Q&A box on the Zoom. So those who are attending online, if you have any question, please write it down in the Q&A box. And those attending physically, please raise your hand if you have a question. And I received one question. This is a question to Mr. Okuyama. So the Kobe branch and the Hyogo Prefecture have a kind of collaboration. And is it possible to have such collaboration in other prefectures? So this collaboration agreement is based on the Town and People Collaboration Act. So the local governments have its own local strategy, and which includes the collaboration in terms of the carbon neutrality. Then the initiatives in achieving the carbon neutrality is included in that plan. It is possible to have a collaboration on that theme. And this loan based on the collaboration is based on such a plan. So local government gives a kind of certificate to the specific company as a kind of subject of the loan. And if that is possible in any prefecture. And when we started this kind of loan provision from the several branches, I received the questions how it can be adopted in other regions too. So I think in the near future, this kind of initiative will be started in other prefectures too. Thank you very much. Any other question? So the microphone is coming to you. Please wait for you. Thank you very much for the introduction of your really informative introduction of the initiatives. I have a question about the renewable energy, including the power and water. So they are not stable enough, in my view. So the efficient use is very important. And I think the role to be played by the digitalization is very important. So thank you very much for the introduction of the initiatives by Mr. Kishimoto. And as for the renewable energy, so I can feel that there's a kind of movement to strengthen the production of renewable energy. But to have the efficient use of the renewable energy, which is limited, I think the energy conservation is very important. So what about the use of the digitalization and the conservation of energy? And if you have any specific project going on, I want to hear about it. I think SymEnergy or NTT and Anode have any kind of example. So do you have any unique examples to show us? So if it's not actually implemented in society, or if you have a kind of any demonstration of the use of digital power for the energy conservation, please let us know. So Mr. Kishimoto. So NTT Group consumes 1% of the total energy consumption in the world. So from the holding company, we're told to reduce energy consumption by 5 to 6% every year. So we are using tools for the visualization of the situation. So HEMS and the BEMS. So the visualization of the power consumption in household would be progressed from now. So we'll use application and smartphones to see the situation of the consumption of energy. And so we let the employees of the company or general public change their code of action. That is the kind of thing, based on such accumulation of the changes, we can achieve the great things. And now the storage battery is a big topic. So power is produced and it has to be all consumed. So the unused power is a kind of waste. So during the daytime, we can produce more energy, and we have to have the storage battery to store the power. That is for the household use or electric vehicles. So I think there is many occasions of many places for the storage battery to play a big role, and so that we can 100% consume the power we produce. And of course, we can use this for the local production and local consumption of energy. And when we can have the storage of the power, we can invite the companies to come to the region that will contribute to the revitalization of the economy. And how about Emerson? I think what I want to say is maybe the repeat of what Mr. Kishimoto said. So when there is more renewable energy introduced, you do not know when you have the surplus of power. For example, today we have the snow, so the solar power generation is not operating at 100%. But when in the sunny days, we have the operation of the solar power generation, so we can have the storage battery or heat pump, so you can have the hot water saved for the night use. So when we have the shortage of power and when we have the surplus, if these things can be more visualized, I think we can contribute to the better and efficient use of the power. So when the power is more inexpensive, and when it's more expensive. When the power expensive, means that the power is in shortage. So that is a timing for you to consume energy. So I think we have the responsibility to disseminate such information to the general public. Thank you very much. So if you have any other question, please raise your hand. This is Uehara from the New Energy Promotion Association. I have a question to UEMATSU from SymEnergy. So Hyogo Prefecture, when it mentions the renewable energy, it has the wind power or solar power generations. But I think compared to the other regions, Hyogo Prefecture lags behind in terms of the renewable energy production. So I think the biomass power generation is a kind of strength of the Hyogo Prefecture. And you mentioned the issue of the unattended bamboo forest and chars and the use of the biomass energy. But I think by burning these, I think they may cause another type of issues. And if this issue can be solved, I think the biomass will have the greater potential in Hyogo Prefecture, but not only in Hyogo Prefecture, but in Japan and also in the world. And I think biomass has a potential to grow as an energy source. And what issues do you see in having the biomass grow as a potential energy source? Thank you very much for your question. So we regard the biomass as a very energy source has great potential, and we have been working on it. But actually, depending on the material we use, the biomass boiler or the power generators type of trouble or the scale of trouble are quite different. So, for example, when we operate it in Hokkaido and in Kyushu, the type of troubles we have are quite different. So, depending on the material we have to find the appropriate biomass boiler or power generators. And it takes much time to go through the trials and errors, and it requires much investment. And for that part, without the support or any kind of measures, we cannot expect the kind of rapid progress of the biomass as energy source. So just having the boiler is not enough. And in Japan, we do not have the manufacturer in Japan for such systems. So if we can find any kind of manufacturers which can provide the system, so if in case of any kind of trouble, we can work with them immediately, that would be great. So we want to have the support from the government in such a phase. Thank you very much. Any other question? No question from the audience? Then, I now received one question online. So we are now at the kind of we are in a decisive decade. So if that a person's sense of crisis differs from person to person, so is it possible to have the more frequent dissemination of information from the Hyogo Prefecture so that the general public can have the more urgency in tackling these issues? So I would like to ask Suga-san this question. So how the Hyogo Prefecture government will work on this point? So starting from 2020, we have been giving the session to the high school students on the theme. So we have started such project, and high school students said that they have never heard of such topics from their parents or from their friends. So they didn't know that Hyogo Prefecture or Hyogo Prefecture government has been working on such initiatives. And I was a bit much shocked to hear that. So how to reach a target audience? We, as a local government, have been using various tools, including the social network, to reach the target audience, but sometimes have difficulties. So we have to come up with more better ways of reaching the audience. And one of them is this kind of forum. So we are having this forum, and we have the panelists from the various fields. So by having the knowledge and wisdom of these experts from various fields, we would like to make the further effort so that we can deepen the understanding of the general public in Hyogo Prefecture. Thank you very much. So now time has come to conclude this panel discussion. So I'd like to conclude the panel discussion now. Thank you very much for your kind cooperation to the smooth proceeding of the panel discussion and sharing your ideas and experiences. Thank you very much. So thank you very much. This concludes the panel discussion. So thank you very much, the panelists on the stage, and Mr. Kojima. Please give them warm applause. So the panelists, please take your seat in the arena. Now, on behalf of the organizer today, we'd like to invite Mr. Tomisaka Ryuji from the Asia Pacific Network for the Global Change Research to give us the closing remark.
Yes, everyone, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy end of year schedule to join us today. On behalf of the APN and other organizers, we would like to give you a closing remark. So APN is Asia-Pacific Network for Global Change Research. We were established in 1996, and it is currently consisted of 22 member countries. We are an intergovernmental network. In 1999, the APN Secretariat was established, and from Kobe, APN has promoted and fostered regional-based research and capacity building in the Asia-Pacific region. Accordingly, APN will continue to contribute to the 6th assessment report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, and the Conference of the Parties, COP, to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, which are related to today's topic, among other activities. As a contribution to the Hyogo Prefecture, where the Secretariat is located, APN organizes an annual event for prefectural residents entitled Hyogo Activities. This forum will be one of this year's Hyogo activity events. In this forum, we featured a keynote speech by IGES President Takeuchi and a dialogue between Governor SAITO and President Takeuchi in the first part. In the second part, a panel discussion by panelists from 5 different fields of expertise was held, where advanced initiatives and knowledge in various areas were presented to realize a decarbonized society. Many of today's topics introduced efforts to change the overall structure of society, and I feel that many of these efforts can be taken up as the next action from tomorrow. And I am sure that participants were able to find a variety of ideas that will help them realize a decarbonized society from the local level. I believe that today's conference is going to give you some hints for your activities from tomorrow. So, at today's conference, which is entitled International Forum, it was held with simultaneous interpretation in English and Japanese and was broadcast online. I would like to thank you once again for the many and wide-ranging participants from Japan and abroad. Lastly but not least, I would like to conclude my closing remarks by expressing my gratitude to all those who supported and cooperated in organizing this forum, including IGES and Hyogo Prefecture. And I hope that today's forum will be meaningful to you as well. And that concludes my closing remark. Thank you very much for your participation today. Thank you very much. This concludes today's forum. Thank you very much for your long time participation. And please make sure to answer the questionnaire. Thank you very much for joining once again.